Most respected Thai, dear Sangha, we are in the new Hamlet, in the full moon meditation hall, on a day of prayer for peace. And that peace will come from you as well as from us. Today is the 6th of March in the year 2022. And we are going to begin our prayer with the chanting of the name of Valokitesvara. Valokitesvara is the Bodhisattva who knows how to listen deeply to the cries of the world. And that Bodhisattva is in the heart of each of us and of everyone. So today, as we chant, we will discover the Bodhisattva in us. And together we will use our energy to send to Eastern Europe. We know that we are not separate from those who are in a situation of war. And the suffering, their suffering, is also our suffering. So we have all been deeply touched by the news we have received from Ukraine. And today we want to turn that suffering into compassion. When we chant the name of Valokitesvara, we always begin by coming back to ourself and touching the suffering that is in ourself. As we said, we are not separate from those who are in Ukraine. We are not separate from the Russian soldiers, the Ukrainian soldiers, or the civilians who are living there. Their suffering is also ours. But when we touch that suffering, it's an opportunity for us to give rise to compassion. And we give rise to compassion in ourselves and for ourselves. Namo valokitesvara. I know I suffer, and I send my compassion to myself. And then we know that the seed of violence, the seed which may give rise to war, is also in us. And we want to be able to live and look at those who are in our environment, near to us, with the eyes of compassion, with love, and not with resentment or hatred. So we must also be aware of our own ability to give rise to compassion to our loved ones and those who are near to us as we chant. And finally, we want to send our energy to Ukraine, to Russia, and maybe to many more places who are also involved in this conflict. We do not want to take sides. We know that both sides suffer. And that is the beauty of the Buddhist path, the path of Valokitesvara, to be able to hear the suffering of everyone involved. And then we realize that compassion is a power, is a strength. And the war is also about power, economic power. But our power as practitioners is spiritual power, the power of compassion. So please join us in sending your energy at this important moment. And if tears come to your eyes, you can welcome the tears. They are tears of compassion. They are tears of healing. Healing for yourself and healing for the world. dear respected Thai, dear Sangha, dear friends who have joined us online today. Dear Thai, we know you are with us. Your transformation body arrived at Plum Village yesterday in preparation for the ceremony of the 49th day since your passing, when we will spread your ashes at Plum Village. Thai's Dharma body is everywhere. It's throughout the world. It's in our hearts and in our minds. It's in our practice. And we are practicing wholeheartedly now during this time of war in the Ukraine. Thai's life was to demonstrate that peace is possible. And when the late Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. nominated Thai for the Nobel Peace Prize, he said that Thai was an apostle of peace and nonviolence. And we, as Thai's continuation now, will continue this path of peace and nonviolence in our everyday lives, in our personal practice, in our practice with others, and in encouraging a global spirituality now, a global ethics that the Buddha and Thai envision for the world, especially in time of war. I realized this morning that what I share will only be a beginning. It's an introduction to more teachings that we'll be offering in the next weekend, in retreats in Italy, in France. So it's just a beginning, and perhaps it's just a map of areas that where we can apply the values of love, compassion, and peace with our practice of mindfulness. We know that mindfulness enables us to be aware of what is happening in us and around us. And these two aspects of our practice of mindfulness are especially crucial now, as we're aware of our feelings, our strong emotions, as we learn about what's happening in the Ukraine, as we witness the demonstrations for peace around the world. We're aware of what emotions are coming up for us. So this is an important part of our practice, to be able to recognize and embrace these emotions, and to calm our mind and to calm our body, so we can experience that peace is possible for our body and mind in the present moment. Thai gave us the gift of appreciating how life is available in the present moment. Though in Ukraine, the present moment is full of sadness and despair and fear and uncertainty, we can offer our love and support to these people and the places that are suffering now. I don't have access to the social media that many of our friends who are joining us online you have access to much more. Perhaps the television, news reports. I have access to one, and I think that was enough for me. It's about all I can handle. But I want to share something that has, touched me deeply and saddened me immensely. Is that I learned from the news media that I read that 842 children in the Ukraine have been wounded because the missiles have hit the kindergartens and the orphanages. But also in Moscow, Russia, 5 children, ages 7, 9, and 11, they made a little poster saying no to war. They were put into jail and had to spend the night in jail. So we're witnessing something that I could never imagine would have happened. And in fact, when I heard the news that there was the war in Ukraine, I couldn't believe it. No, it can't be happening, but it is happening. And I want to read a short a correspondence of a monastic with a Sangha member and a friend of Plum Village. Her whole family loved coming to the summer retreat, and her children loved the children's program. But since COVID, the coronavirus, we haven't been able to have the summer retreat. She works for the United Nations High Committee on Refugees. And we asked her, how are you doing? Because we know already there are 84 million refugees in the world. And with the war in Ukraine, that meant more refugees, right? And she said, well, she felt her anxiety just spiraling on hearing of the war. But then she said, I prayed, and I came back to myself and my practice. And she meditates every day. And she's very thankful for the teachings and the guidance that she received from Thai. And in fact, that her colleagues, some of them, they're making sessions of just sitting together and breathing. So a monastic offered this response that I practice calming my body and mind more than ever because I noticed that I slip into negativity very easily. So I stop the negative thinking and I redirect it to what is positive. So what I can offer all of you now at the United Nations High Commission on Refugees is to take care of yourselves and stay with the practice and the teachings of Thai. What he taught his whole life, and he practiced mindful breathing, mindful walking. That 2 practices that sustained Thai during the war in Vietnam. Thai came to the West as a single cell. He describes himself as a single cell to call for the end of the war. And because of his practice, his deep faith, he survived as a single cell. And now the single cell has become communities and sanghas around the world, and we are practicing together, and we can create peace. So we may look at what's before us in terms of our practice in three ways. One is to know how to do our personal practice. Another way is to develop peace in our relationships with others. And this means creating peace at home. This year we're practicing with the 2 sentences that we receive every Lunar New Year, Tet. The English translation is harmony at home and peace all around. So when we are living peacefully at home, with our colleagues at work, working peacefully, and in society, then we're creating peace. And then the third aspect of our practice will be the collective awakening, the global practice of peace. And for this, Tai offered the ethics and the global spirituality that are contained in the 5 mindfulness trainings and the 14 mindfulness trainings of the Order of Interbeing. We know that individuals, when they connect, when they gather, they create communities. So there's the individual consciousness and the collective consciousness. Individual consciousness is affected by collective consciousness. And collective consciousness is made by individuals' consciousness. So they inter-are. So talking about our personal practice, which is not really separate from practicing with others, but we'll talk about how can I have my daily practice. One is to take care of our strong emotions. And if they are the sadness, the despair, the anger, the helplessness, the rage, the hatred even, the fear, the anxiety, everything connected with how you are responding to what you receive, the news or whatever. And we do this by the practice of stopping, coming back to ourselves with mindful breathing. We stop, we pause, and we might say we take care of the stress in simple terms. The 4 mindful breathing exercises the Buddha offered are essential, I've found. I'm aware of my breath. I'm following my breath. I follow it as long as the in-breath lasts, as long as the out-breath lasts. I follow my breath. And then I'm aware of my body, and I relax my body with my in-breath and out-breath. So these are daily practices you can do anywhere. We can do anytime in our daily lives. The second practice is embracing, recognizing and embracing these very concrete emotions. If we can name them, that's fine. If we can't name them, it's still okay. We can still calm these strong, painful emotions of suffering, of fear. And we recognize these are the 7th and 8th of the breathing exercises the Buddha offered in the Anapanasati Sutra. I'm calming these emotions. For some, the mindful breathing will help you calm your mind. Depending on the strength of the emotions, or whether they've been there in your ancestors for generations, you may want to think of adding walking meditation. And we know from Thay's simple but deep teachings in the calligraphies he wrote, peace is every breath with my mindful breathing, but peace is every step. So I walk gently on Mother Earth. I release my suffering to Mother Earth. And I walk until I feel better. So very briefly, we can practice mindful walking to help transform our strong emotions. But the mindful breathing and mindful walking are to generate happiness and joy. You know, we're in touch with nature and the beauties of life, so walking is also a healing practice, a practice to sustain our well-being. It's to nourish our gratitude. Our body is okay. We enjoy the walking. There's nowhere to arrive but the present moment. Peace is every step, and every step is nourishing. Every step is freedom. Every step brings me joy. So these two basic practices for us to continue at home or at work have been very, I would say, essential. To the degree that you can do them, all right? Another practice that we do is to take care of the thoughts, be aware of the thoughts that we're thinking. When I heard about the war, I couldn't believe it. Then I got angry, and I had just horrible thoughts. I said, why am I thinking that? Normally I don't think that way. Why? And then I looked deeply into myself and my ancestors, and I realized that in me, on my father's side, my father's father and his grandfather came from Kiev, the Ukraine. And I thought, okay, it's my ancestors whom I didn't know. I didn't know my father's side of the family very much at all. And I thought, okay, maybe it's my Ukrainian ancestors who are angry now. And then the sadness started. So we want to be aware of the thoughts that we think. And when the negativity starts, notice it, stop that thinking. Don't welcome it. Notice it, and then we say change the CD, or Thai has said change the CD. And the Buddha has written a very beautiful statement and particularly one sentence stood out for me. It's found in the Anguttara Nikaya, Book 4, number 117. And it's about taking care of our thoughts, our minds. And it's called For One's Own Sake. For one's own sake, diligent mindfulness should be made the mind's guard. Let our mindfulness be there to decide what kind of thoughts will I allow myself to think, and what kind of thoughts will the mind's guard say, no, you can't come in. related to this is something I remember Tai once teaching. He said, if mindfulness is not present, it's as if nobody's at home. He said, it's as if the temple is deserted. So we need our mindfulness energy to be watered so that we know what kind of thoughts are there. If no one's at home, anybody can come into the house. The door's unlocked, they come in, the windows, the door, any kinds of thoughts can come in. But when mindfulness is there as the mind's guard decides what thoughts will be helpful. The Buddha continues, may my mind not harbor hatred towards anything inducing hatred. For this reason, diligent mindfulness should be made the mind's guard for one's own sake when we're practicing our daily practice. The Buddha continues, when the mind does not harbor hatred towards hate-inducing objects. I will stop here and say we've heard from some people in their emails how can they handle their hatred towards the President of Russia. And the Buddha says, when the mind does not harbor hatred towards any hate-inducing objects, any president, the practitioner is free from hatred. Then the practitioner will not waver, shake, or tremble. He or she will not succumb to fear, nor will he or she adopt the views of others. So we want to be diligent and aware of our thoughts and not succumb to hating the person or the people we think responsible for the war. Though perhaps it's not just one person, but a committee of people, large or small committee, I have no idea, but maybe not just one. Yeah. So that's our third practice. Stop being mindful breathing, mindful walking, being attentive to the thoughts that we think and not letting hatred be one of our thoughts towards any object. I'd like to invite us to listen to a sound of the bell. And there's a beautiful gatha that Tai has written, and this could be part of our daily practice. Listening to the bell. I will read the gatha, and it goes like this. Listening to the bell, I feel my afflictions and suffering begin to dissolve. My mind is calm, my body relaxed. A smile is born on my lips. Following the bell sound, my breathing guides me back to the safe island of mindfulness. In the garden of my heart, the flower of peace blooms beautifully. Let's create peace now with our breathing. So we can invite people to download the sound of the mindfulness bell onto your device, computer, to have it at home or at work. And this bell of mindfulness is available on our Plum Village website, PV app. And you can reflect on the beautiful gatha while listening to the sound of the bell. Another practice to do is to light a candle every day. This will be a candle of offering in the light of hope, of love and peace to the people in Ukraine, of courage, of resilience, of compassion and understanding of their situation and their suffering. The light of the candle gives warmth and love, and it's associated with the places of worship around the world, the temples, the churches, the synagogues, the mosques. So you can create a place of spirituality at home or anywhere by lighting a candle. And while lighting the candle, you may want to reflect on some of these words offered by the Buddha in the Metta Sutra, the Discourse on Love. You may think and say to yourself, let no one do harm to anyone. Let no one put the life of anyone in danger. Let no one, out of anger or ill will, wish anyone any harm. Let us cultivate boundless love to all living beings in the entire cosmos, to everyone. So we can include the President Putin. We can speak to him and say, may you not do harm to anyone. May you not put anyone's life in danger. May you not, out of anger or ill will, wish any of the Ukrainians any harm. Perhaps this conflict, the war, goes back many generations. It may have been part of his ancestral heritage. I know nothing about the president. All I could find out is that he has 2 daughters, and perhaps from his 2 daughters he has grandchildren, great-grandchildren. And my wish is that his family and friends can be a source of love for him and support. We know political negotiations are I don't know if they're going full steam, but they're happening, and maybe that's not what he needs. Maybe something more personal will reach him. I know in Liberia, there was a civil war, and the women of the country went to the army general, and they pleaded with him and they begged with him, please end the war. Our sons, our husbands, our children are dying. They listened. He listened to them, and the war was ended. The women were able to contribute to the generals ending the war. So my wish is for perhaps if the president has people in his family, his grandsons perhaps, or who knows, they can help him. My other wish is that there will be peace. The war will end. And I say this because during the Vietnam War,
Thai was asked by a child, "Will the war ever end, Thai?" And Thai didn't know what to say right away, but he thought, the Buddha taught impermanence. So Thai said, "Yes, my child, the war will end," knowing that everything is impermanent. We learned that Ukraine is a country that values the religion. The Orthodox Christians are there, and as well as, I believe, the Jewish faith. My great-grandfather was a Talmud scholar, but perhaps the whole family disappeared during the Second World War. But we know that Jesus taught universal love. He taught agape. And he said, "Please love one another as I have loved you." And he said to his disciples, "People will know you are my disciples by the way you love one another." So now is the time for all of our sanghas, our communities, and our friends to develop our capacity of love, compassion, understanding, and forgiveness. And peace is possible. And Thai said, "There is no way to peace. Peace is the way." So when we live our lives with peace and openness of mind and heart, peace is there. Thai wrote a beautiful calligraphy, and it was peaceful mind, open heart. So our hearts are open when our mind is peaceful. Lighting a candle of peace, listening to the sound of the bell, offering words of, we might say, encouragement to the people planning the war, executing the war in Russia. These are things we can do. We can remind ourselves that with kind spiritual friends, people in our communities, in our sanghas, our friends at work, just kind people, we are on the path of goodness. This path of goodness is inspired by Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and all the other great spiritual teachers. I'd like to read another gatha Thai wrote, and it's before inviting the bell. So I will read it, and then we'll hear another sound of the bell. And you may want to read this if you invite the bell at home for yourself or before listening to a sound of the bell. And it's very beautiful. May the sound of this bell penetrate deeply into the cosmos, so areas in the darkest places, the places of war, the place of Ukraine, areas in the darkest places, in these areas may living beings hear it clearly, so their suffering will cease and understanding arise in their hearts, and they can transcend the path of anxiety and sorrow, and we would add fear, despair, and hatred. So let's take a moment now, to breathe. I want to share that much is being done now. In France, I read that 15 trucks, the big trucks, and 15 caravans full of supplies for the refugees who are now in the countries surrounding Ukraine. They have left for Poland. It's a big caravan. Many departments, many areas in France now are opening their town hall, the mairie, to receive the donations from the people living in France. And you can donate food that won't non-perishable food. Also items for the babies. They need diapers. The women need their hygiene products for their monthly needs. Sleeping bags, anything you can imagine will be gratefully received. And already the lines are open for transporting these donations from France to humanitarian organizations that are already there helping the people, the refugees in the countries surrounding Ukraine. There have been more than 1 million refugees who have left Ukraine. So help is possible. We can offer our generosity. Basic goods, toothbrush, toothpaste. We can think of what we don't need. If we have things we don't need in Plum Village, they can be offered. One day, recently, when it was raining, I knew I had to take a walk for my practice, and it had been raining, but the rain had stopped, and I took a walk, and I found there was a very tiny, delicate plum tree, very young, not as tall as myself. And I saw on the branches there was a little white plum blossom, a few of them. And the branch was soaking wet, and there were raindrops on the branch and hanging there. But the little white plum blossom was there so courageously. She was there. He was there, whatever. The plum blossom was there. Courageously, full of resilience. She stayed there as the energies of the rain and the wind were swirling about her. The little plum blossom was there. So these small messengers that nature offers us when we walk, when we listen to the birds, we know that spring is here. Look at the beautiful mimosa. Look at the beautiful purple iris. The pacorets are in the grass blooming. The dandelions have manifested. The crocus. Spring has arrived. So in our practice, not only do we handle the suffering, embrace the suffering, Thai has taught us, nourish the happiness. So this is just as important for us everywhere now. Spring is here. The blackbirds are back. And they sing night and day. It's a non-stop concert. The sky is blue when there are no clouds, but the clouds are beautiful. They give us rain. And then we don't have to water the happy farm. So life is offering so many wonders. And the address of life, Thai has told us, is here and now, in the present moment. So it's just as important for us to nourish our gratitude and happiness for so many wonders of life that are truly nourishing us. The Buddha spoke about 4 nutriments, and we know we eat a healthy diet. We know we're not eating any animal that has been killed. We're not eating any fish or chicken or any living form of life that has been killed. For friends who may be joining us online, we encourage you to think about the possibility of protecting life and honoring life by moving away from eating forms of life that have been killed, animal forms of life that have been killed just for you to eat. So we can consume food that is offered by the earth, by nature. Some of you will eat what the chickens offer, or what the goats offer, or the sheep offer, okay. But the plants. But we try to move away from supporting killing. We nourish ourselves with our sense organs, a second form of nutriment. But now we come to volition and consciousness. So volition is our deepest desire, what motivates us, what inspires us, what gives us the wish to continue. So our volition is to offer happiness. We have the bodhisattva volition to help the world. And this is volition going for the benefit of all living beings. It nourishes our happiness. It gives us protection, really. Protection because we are creating love and compassion and understanding. But we also will recognize when volition goes into a dark place, where there is the volition to harm, to kill, to destroy. Both kinds of volition, generally speaking, need some kind of a plan. Yes. We have the volition to help, to be bodhisattvas, and what guidelines do we have? We have the mindfulness trainings. Volition going into a dark area means that you have strategy for war. So you have killing and you have the armies. So what we see now, in what I see is happening, is that they're trying to prevent the volition of continuing the war by cutting the nutriment of Russia with economic sanctions, cutting off their capacity to finance the war. So these measures are being done by, I think, coordinated efforts. I'm not sure, but there are more and more economic sanctions are being enacted. So the nutriment of war cannot continue. You cut off the food and then it can't continue. The other food is the consciousness. And we know we are nourishing the best seeds in our consciousness with our daily practice, reading the sutras, with the practice of the 5 mindfulness trainings, And this nourishes our seeds of understanding and wanting to end suffering. Because we know all of the mindfulness trainings, the 5 and the 14, really make us aware of the causes of suffering and how to cut the nutriment of suffering and prevent suffering. So we nourish the best seeds in our consciousness. In our practice in relationships now, this is the second aspect of our practice, and this is to really practice very well, to nourish and help the best seeds in one another to manifest. Do you know Thai proposed not only the peace treaty, there is a peace treaty that we used in the very early days of Plum Village, and it was very specific for when anger arose. I recognized, whoops, I had an eruption of anger, and there are very concrete practices in the peace treaty. I will practice to stop speaking. I will not continue to force the other person to engage in talking it out, right? I will not have an argument. I will stop speaking. I will go and take care of my anger. I will practice mindful walking and breathing to transform this energy of anger in me. The other part of the treaty is the person with whom that person has gotten angry. So if someone has gotten angry at me, I know what I have to do. What I have to do is respect this person. Respect the fact that this person has anger. And I promise not to try to get that person to talk it out, to find a solution, to reconcile. No. I will give the person the time and the space to reflect, to understand why anger has been there. And I myself will practice, even though I wasn't the person who got angry, I will practice to look deeply. What have I done? Perhaps I have done something unskillful that has triggered anger in this person. That's the peace treaty. It was formulated in Italy, many in the 90s. Thai came back with the peace treaty after giving retreats in Italy. And he said it was 2 Italian lawyers that formulated the peace treaty with Thai. Then Thai developed the practice of beginning anew, where we have different practices of creating understanding and appreciation and love, watering the best seeds in one another. And we know by appreciating and letting people know we see their good qualities, their flower will bloom. We help their flower bloom. And then by being able to say, I'm sorry, I recognize I made a mistake, that opens the way for negotiation, for reconciliation. And then by proposing solutions or admitting my vulnerability, this also creates ways of reconciliation and understanding, harmony and compassion. So understanding and compassion go together. So that was the beginning, a new practice available for our relationships with others. And then another practice I mentioned was the happiness treaty. And you know, when there's war, we need treaties. Okay, we have a peace treaty, and now we have a happiness treaty. I don't know that if it was ever actually written out, but Thai described it clearly. He said, in a family or in a relationship with two people or more people, roommates, friends, whatever, we make a vow, we sign this treaty, to not water the negative seeds in my partner, my husband, my wife, my roommate. I promise to not water your negative seeds, because if they manifest, you will suffer and I will suffer. That's interbeing. And then the other person will learn from you, what is your vulnerability? What do they do or say that waters your negative seeds or your seeds of suffering? And once they know that, because you have communicated, then they will not water your seeds. Okay? So the harmony, peace will be possible, because now you know more about each other. And you don't want to make one another suffer, each other suffer, because everyone will suffer. You both will suffer. Okay, so we have a happiness treaty. These are practices for creating peace in relationships. And this contributes to collective global peace. So let's listen to a sound of the bell, and we'll come to the final aspect of practice, which is the global call for a global spirituality right now and global ethics. A cloud never dies. I smile to the cloud in my tea. Thai is with us. We're simply sharing what we have learned from Thai. So Thai revised the 5 mindfulness trainings and the 14 mindfulness trainings and worded them so that they would be, we might say, compatible with all the religions or spiritual paths in the world. They could be easily understood and practiced, easily accepted as well. And he offered them as the Buddhist vision, but also we believe the fruit of his deep wisdom as well, as for a global spirituality and ethics. And by ethics we know what to do and what not to do. And ethics involves both doing the good and refraining from causing harm and causing suffering. So we know each training begins aware of the suffering caused. And the causes of suffering are given for each training. And then ways of practices are given in each training of how not to cause suffering, what to do, how to practice to create happiness and peace. So we have these mindfulness trainings available for a global spiritual awakening now. And it's a collective energy now that will bring peace, I believe. Of course, the negotiations are essential on the political level. But I have found that maybe we might say on the spiritual level or the energetic level, that prayer, the sending of metta, is effective. I remember once, many years ago, there was an experiment, very small scale. It was done in a coronary care unit, and I don't remember the doctor's name or where, but I think it was in the United States. Please excuse me, I can't give credit to the doctor. But patients had just had a heart attack, and they were very fragile. Their hearts had not healed yet. And the patients in the unit were divided into two groups. One group was prayed for. Daily prayers were sent to this group of patients, and I don't know what was prayed for, but we might imagine for their health or recovery. The other group of patients were not prayed for, but both group of patients received the same necessary medical care. And the result of this experiment, afterwards, they discovered that the group of heart patients that had been prayed for had less complications. Their recovery was better. Perhaps their recovery was swifter. And I know in my own practice, when I do the practice of metta, it helps. That means I send the energy of loving kindness to people who need support and more love and understanding. I send it to myself and to others. We can send it to the president, the two presidents, really, because the reality, as I've seen it, is they don't get along. In the family of man, in the human family, we have two men who don't get along. They are presidents of their country, but they don't get along. But it's much deeper than that. Of course, it's much deeper than that. But we can send our energy of love and compassion. And it's the collective energy, the global collective energy of all religions now, all people, doing a daily practice, calling for peace, that I believe will help. And that's all I can say, is I believe it will help. But it's a call now for all order of interbeing members everywhere on the planet. Maybe to initiate this, to be at the forefront of collective prayer, whatever is your spiritual path, collective metta. You can organize it in your sanghas, just with groups of friends. But perhaps I would like to say daily or more. 5 times a day, we invite our Muslim friends to join in this collective prayer for peace. The third aspect of practicing right now, collective energy for the planet, for the whole planet, because no one knows what the war plans are. The thoughts are invisible. As the COVID virus was invisible, nobody could see it, but it destroyed lives. And nobody knew how to treat it or to test for it. But in the last 3 years, we've learned a lot. But now we're faced again with the unknown and the invisible thoughts, unknown to us, invisible thoughts to us, but known to those who have the aspiration of war. But I believe collective goodwill, collective love, compassion, and the energy of peace, sending it out. Let's try, and it can't hurt. Let's just try. I call for all of our friends, OI members, all of the Dharma teachers now to offer this collective energy. I'd like to invite Tai now to end this Dharma talk with a beautiful poem he wrote. And it's addressed to all of us. So let's enjoy listening to Tai and to remember that peace and happiness are possible. It's a beautiful poem. Spring is here, and Tai always gave us the path of happiness and living in the present moment. He taught us how to live in the present moment with happiness. And he was able to do that. And his life is that message to all of us. What he went through in his whole life is a message to all of us that happiness is possible. So let's hear a sound of the bell before we hear Tai's poem, and then we'll end by listening to 3 sounds of the bell. This morning, the birds joyfully welcome the rising sun. Do you know, my child, that the white clouds are still floating in the vault of the sky? Where are you now? In the country of the present moment, the ancient mountain is still there, although the white-crested wave is still reaching for distant shores. Look again. You will see me in you, and in every leaf and flower bud. If you call my name, you will see me right away. Where are you going? The old frangipani tree offers its fragrant flowers this morning. You and I have never really been apart. Spring has come. The pines have put out new shining green needles. And on the edge of the forest, the wild plum trees have burst into flower.